So one of the principles I talk about in my new book, Reverse Selling, is this concept of uncovering a prospect's real motivation. Now, I'm going to give you an example of what not to do and teach you how to sell anything to anybody. Because traditional selling sounds something like this. Let's look at this mug for an example. Let's pretend that you sell mugs. Traditional selling sounds something like this. Mr. Prospect, this mug is handmade in Italy. Like when you feel this thing, like you are gonna love your coffee so much more by the touch and the feel. The materials they used in this mug are gonna keep your coffee hotter than any other mug. Blah, blah, blah. This is what traditional selling sounds like. The problem with that, when I was doing that little role play with you, you're probably like, dude, it just hurts my ears. And that's what you sound like when you try to convince a prospect of something, when you try to tell somebody something, the person wants to do this. Oh, please shut up. But they're being polite, okay? That's traditional selling. That's what we want to get away from. Because the second you start trying to convince somebody of something and you start spewing out of your mouth with features and benefits and how good this thing is, the person puts up their defenses. The walls come up. People don't want to be sold, but they love to buy. So what do we need to do instead? Here's what we need to do. We have to make the prospect the salesperson. We have to get the prospect to sell themselves on our product or our service. We have to position what we're selling from the eyes or the point of view from the prospect. Well, how do we do that, Brandon? Simple. Here's what we're going to do. Instead of going down a path of convincing the prospect and explaining all the features and all the benefits and all the reasons why you're going to love this mug, you're simply going to ask the prospect a question. You're going to ask the prospect, Mr. Prospect, let me just ask you, I'm just curious, why get a new mug at all? The one you're using now seems phenomenal. Now, for the first time, you've put the prospect in a position to say one of two things. One, they're going to respond with their real motivation. They're going to sell you, and through selling you, they're selling themselves on why the mug they're using now is bad. I've had this thing for 20 years. It's not keeping my coffee hot anymore. You know, the thing's falling apart. There's a crack in the bottom, right? That's what you're looking for when you're communicating with one of your prospects. This is real motivation. Or the prospect says, you're right. I don't need a new mug. Then you could say, thank you for your time and walk out the door. We have to stop convincing people of anything. Telling is not selling. Selling is a series of asking questions to get the prospect, listen closely, to get the prospect to convince themselves that your product or service is what they need. You need to stay out of it. How you do that is by asking questions. For all my realtors out there, okay, let me give you a real world example in real estate sales. Instead of trying to convince somebody that now's the best time to sell their home, simply ask them, Mr. Seller, why sell at all? Your home's beautiful. You're in a great neighborhood. Why not just stay put? And just like the mug, you've put the prospect in a position to now become the salesperson and convince you by convincing themselves why that house won't work for them, which is exactly what you need to do to look for real motivation.